Today we're going to actually dive into a world that is not my expertise. I'm going to be asking the hard hitting questions about branding, graphic design, big mistakes in your professional image with expert designer Caitlin Johnson. Now, I'm super excited for this interview because she has put together some pretty incredible pieces. But not only that, she's building her own business, working with clients every single day. The first year she joined the Social Click, which is my mentorship and mastermind program for freelancers, she 6x'd her business, and every year since she's continued to grow. This year, she's making over $10,000 a month. She started to build a team, and she has worked with several 7 to 8 figure business owners in the last 2.5 years. She has grown her social media accounts to over 12,000 followers combined, all while also being a busy mom. Let's dive on in to this powerful interview. Caitlin, I'm so excited to have you here. Hi. Okay, I am going to just dive right in and ask you a really tough question. I hope you're ready for it.
Okay.
What are some of the biggest mistakes people make with graphic design?
Oof. Where do I start? Um, well, I would say the biggest mistake I see business owners making is giving their team or other contractors graphic design projects and not having a brand set up. Like there's no brand guidelines. So they're kind of just winging it, flying off the cuff and hoping that it like all works out together.
Mhm.
And that never works. It also makes it a lot harder for the business owner because what you if you have zero guidance and direction for that other person, you don't know what you're going to get back. So it just makes the iterations more frequent and more frustrating on both parties. So that's probably the biggest.
I can attest to this firsthand. I remember before I had a brand standard, which I don't follow super closely, but I follow it like loosely, loosey goosey.
Yeah.
Um, I remember one time someone sent back a project and it had green and purple as the colors. And I was like, I can't even be mad. I,
Right.
I didn't even give them a place to start.
Okay. Well, and
Totally.
a lot of a lot of people, if they don't know to ask that on the other side,
Mhm.
especially to freelancers for graphic design, um, they don't know to ask that. And so like you experienced, it's just like,
Mhm.
all right, well, I can't be mad now. I didn't give them that, and then they didn't know to ask. And yeah,
Okay, so how important is having a brand standard in your opinion? I want to hear this.
uh, it's crucial. It is going to trickle down in every piece of marketing and externally focused thing that you do for your business. And if they are all mismatched and not to a certain standard, what that does in your audience's mind is confuse them and they lose trust. And your whole point in marketing is to build up that trust. And so if the visuals aren't consistent, it breaks that trust. And then you're kind of starting over every time that they see you. So
Yes,
it's imperative.
absolutely imperative. So this kind of goes back to like psychographics and almost, yeah, kind of that brand recognition. It doesn't happen without a unified front, does it?
No,
No.
absolutely not. Mm-mm.
Um, There is a movement of people who are sticking to their guns about the idea that it has to be Photoshop for graphic designers and that that is the only way. And I've seen this actually quite a bit lately and I was kind of shocked by it. But it's a small group of graphic designers. What do you think about that idea of Photoshop or the other tools that are available right now?
Well, I especially if you are starting out, I think that's very intimidating. Out of all the three, Adobe platforms that I really use, which is Illustrator, InDesign, and Photoshop.
Mhm.
Photoshop is the hardest. And it really, for me, is my go-to only for photos.
Mm.
Illustrator really is not built for that. InDesign isn't either. So it's very like I want to know what these small group of graphic designers mostly focus on as far as projects goes, because that would be the only way I could see you saying like you should do everything in Photoshop.
Yep.
Because they're built for very specific things.
Mhm.
So if you were to tell me I had to go build logos in Photoshop, I would be like, no, ma'am, no, thank you.
Not gonna
So
happen.
yeah, that's that. I would love to find out who these people are.
Okay, so one question I have for you is when businesses are creating their own graphics, because we've all been through that season, um, does it get to a place where their designs, I'm like talking about old me too, their designs can actually undermine the value of their brand at some point?
Yeah, well, so I am a firm believer, not everybody is. I think anybody can learn to design for
Ooh.
like hands down. But there comes to a point where you either just don't care enough to put the
Mhm.
time and effort into the design so it looks less professional than what it could if you hired a professional designer, or you're really, say you're really good at it, you find out you have to create graphics for your business and then you're good
Yeah,
at it, but you will come to a point in your business no matter what that it's not worth your time to be doing that and somebody else should be doing it because you should be focusing on your visionary roles.
that's so, so, so good. When do you find most businesses benefit from hiring a graphic designer? Like, is there a certain point or threshold? What does it look like?
Yeah, so I typically my like retained graphic design clients are beyond the six-figure mark. It's
Yep.
closer to seven,
Yes.
where you know you're starting to build like significant teams in each departments, and that's
Mhm.
typically the range. Of course, when you're smaller, you're gonna or outsource some graphic design projects, but when you need that ongoing support, it's like the mid six figure to seven figures.
I love hearing that so much. Can you share with us a few things that are outdated? Because I looked back to like my very first lead magnet and I was using lobster font. And instantly I was like, no, because I can see it so clearly. But I don't think, unless someone's in the world of design, they don't necessarily see it. But what are some of those big tells right now? Are there certain like colors or fonts or elements?
So lobster is definitely one. I highly advise anybody staying away from the Arial, like the Comic Sans, anything to scripts are hard because I have a personal affection for them, but
Mhm.
any two like very swirly
Yep.
fonts, you know, that make it more difficult to read. Curls is one of them. That's such a cringy one for me. Um, but as far as like overall aesthetic, um, this one is interesting because it can be very, design is very subjective, right? In general. But on the whole, this is actually like the opposite of what you're saying, because I can describe what you should be doing better than, you know, what you should avoid trend wise. But
Mhm.
less is more, because with any design, I don't care what it is, you're trying to convey a message. And if you're adding too much, so here's one trend is just adding more design elements that just don't need to be there.
Yeah.
It detracts from the message, and people need to know where to focus. So if you have too much going on, or you have um, one thing I really try to avoid is drop shadows on text. And
Mhm.
it's not always a bad thing, but nine times out of 10, when you're not a professional, using drop shadows on text, it makes it harder to read the text. Um,
Yeah.
so that's one thing. So overcomplicating, um, overcomplicating with too many elephants.
I love
I
that.
love elephants. Elements, drop shadows on text, and spacing. You
Yeah.
really want to make sure that your any text or objects have adequate like white, it's called white space, where there's nothing around it.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to necessarily be white. But a trend of like cramping too much in one space, it's
Hmm.
not good. And that goes back to that you're conveying a message. And
Yes.
so if you're cramping this message, whether that be with objects or more text, it's going to be very hard for the viewer to understand what they're supposed to take away from it.
That is big. Okay, what are you seeing trend-wise right now? That let's say just in general, and then you can highlight which ones you like.
Okay. So there's a huge trend for um almost like 70s vibe and like
Yeah.
um more more noise, and I don't mean like audible noise. I mean like the
Hmm.
speckled, speckled
Yep.
um yeah, speckled distortion, and I don't love it. I actually really like there's like wavy text, I think you've probably seen that on like
Like
Instagram.
an acid dream. Like,
Yeah, and
yeah.
I hate it. I really hate it. I get it. It's like fun,
Yes.
but I from a like brand overall
Mm.
standpoint, I think a lot of businesses, unless you're like an Instagram influencer, are going to regret doing something like that. Um, it just has to reflect if that's in your like your brand strategy and you're
Yep.
gonna stick with that, then cool.
Yes.
But that's the one trend that I see that every time I see it, I'm like, you're gonna regret that later.
They're gonna
Um,
have to rebrand.
They're gonna have to, which is fine.
Yep.
To all even big brands have, they evolve and they have to. But with things like that, you do it more
Yeah.
frequently if you know. Um, what's another trend? I think that bold colors are actually going to be making more of a comeback because everything has kind of
Yeah.
neutralized.
Yes.
Um, and I see that being reflected in more recent designs, and I do love that trend.
The
Um, I,
neutral.
yeah, no,
Oh, the
well,
bold
I
color.
do, I do have an effect. Most of my stuff is pretty neutral, but I do like that, but it reflects, my
Yep.
brand. So, but I do like the influence of more bold colors coming back in for
Yeah.
brands. I think that as a whole, design has almost become so neutral.
Mm.
I don't know if you've noticed that a lot of like high-end luxury brands for um,
Yeah.
like design bags and things, they've all gone to like a very boring black and white font, and that's it.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I do not like that. I'm
Mhm.
like, where's the personality? You've
Yeah.
lost everything.
Mhm.
So that's a trend that I do not like, and I don't think that's going to be long-lived, honestly.
Yeah. Okay. I love those so far. Um, what are your favorite types of projects to take on?
Branding, hands down. I
Mhm.
love um building the foundation of the brand and making sure that your message, your visuals, and everything all align together, because at the end, um, you realize how much you've kind of like put together this Frankenstein business. And then
Yep.
you to this point where you're like, oh my gosh, this business is like taken on this whole form. And that's when we get to come in and like give it a face and a look and
Yes.
like a real identity.
Mhm.
Um, and that's just really cool to me.
I love that so much. Caitlin, I know there's people who are going to be watching who want to learn more about you. Where is the easiest place for them to learn more about you?
So the funnest place is probably TikTok.
Yep.
And I would say my second one would be Instagram. So
Mhm.
That's,
Beautiful.
yeah.
We'll link to those above this video, below this video, or at rachelpedersen.com/podcast. And you also have a freebie for our amazing listeners, right?
I
Right, right,
do.
right.
Yeah, the powerful branding bundle. So it's not just one thing, it's three things. And it's going to help you understand all of what goes into building a really powerful brand and then putting all of those pieces together, because typically people just have a logo and they're like, okay, what next? So there's so much more that goes into that, and that's going to walk you through all that.
Beautiful. And we will link to that as well. Caitlin, thanks so much for joining me.
You're welcome.
This was
Thank you for
awesome.
having me.
And we'll
Yeah.
see you all in the next episode. Bye, guys.